Lesson 4, Tough on Rocks. You're going to start this lesson by reviewing what has already been learned during the soils portion. You'll talk about the different experiments that were done, how students learned to classify soils, and you'll want to look at the soil test that was done growing seeds in different types of soils. Depending on how much time has passed since you first planted, this may be a good time to end that experiment. If you need a little bit more time, you can certainly save that for the beginning of lesson 5 as well. Just kind of gauge how your plants have been growing. Talk about, even if you're not done with the experiment, talk about how some are more effective than others and what students are noticing. Have them apply that to the ball tests that they did. If students are noticing that the clay was a little bit more difficult, have them look at the roots in there. Have them think about what that clay did when they got it wet with water and then allowed it to dry, and how would that impact the plant's roots being able to get into the soil. As they're talking about which soils they think worked best and why, remind students that soils don't actually provide food for plants. That's a common misconception, and it's one we'll really want to work on emphasizing with them at this time. The soils do provide minerals, which assist the plant, but they don't provide the food. That happens as the plants grow and through photosynthesis using the leaves. You can make that example a little more clear to students by letting them know it would be the equivalent of them just trying to eat vitamins or minerals and no food at all. Plants just can't get enough nutrients just from the soil alone. That won't sustain them. So as they're talking about this, just make sure that there's no misconception that the soil is what the plant is using for food. Okay. As they've done that, then you'll want to review the different tests that you did and how that went and what they've learned to allow them some chances to share their learning so far in this unit. Then we're going to transition and be working on rocks today. They're going to start hopefully with some rocks that they've brought from home, some rocks that they've found interesting, and have them share the different rocks that they brought. They can share in small groups. You can do a class discussion, however that best works for you. Again, this is a great time to really incorporate some good vocabulary, good use of adjectives, and using very precise language. There's a lot to see with all of the different types of rocks, and it's usually something students find very interesting and engaging. Okay. You can talk about using shapes to sort the rocks. First, have them sort their rocks in their group by rocks that have sharp edges as well as some that have more rounded edges. After they've had a chance to do that, ask the students on their own to pick their own way that they want to classify and sort their rocks in their group. And they may try 2 or 3 different classifications as they're doing that. This is really a free chance for them to explore and to come up with lots of different attributes that they might want to classify by. Once they've done that, have them make their observations written in their student booklet about the different properties that they used for classification. The next part we're going to talk about today is weathering rocks. And this is where you can refer back to the discussion you had about some rocks having more rounded edges while some have sharper edges. And we're going to talk about how that can happen, as well as how rocks appear in so many different sizes. This can go back to the sieve experiment from the previous lesson and about how those rocks got to be the different sizes they are. And we'll use weathering today in this experiment to demonstrate how that can happen. So you're first going to pass out samples of pumice for the students to observe. Have them take a look at it. They'll notice that it's very light, and you can explain that's because of all of the air pockets inside of it. What they'll want to do is to first trace this piece of pumice in their book before we do any experimenting with it, so that they can see how it started. They can do measurements on size as well. Then what you'll want to do is to give them a plastic cup, use some of the rocks that they've brought, and put the pieces of pumice in there. And they are going to practice weathering these rocks. What they'll do for that is they're going to need to shake this. It should happen for a long time, at least 5 minutes of shaking, so they probably want to pass it around in their groups. And after they've had a chance to shake it, obviously I haven't done it for 5 minutes. After they've had a chance to do that, they're going to open it up, find their piece of pumice from before, and observe how it has changed. They'll need to make a drawing again. They'll trace it again, and then they can do written observations as well as the changes that occurred during the weathering.